Today's daf is daf samach hey, and we'll begin with the last line on daf samach dalinum and beis. Rav Yehuda shaderle means he sent. L'shader means to send. Kurbana, kurbana is matana. And to whom did he send this gift? La'avidrana, to a certain guy by the name of Adrana. Biyom Edom. Now we had Biyom Edom at the very beginning of the Masechta. And we said we don't do any business dealings with a an idolater on his festival day because he's going to go in and pay homage to his idol, and therefore we violate the Isur of Lifnei Iver. Omar, but now he tries to explain why he did such a thing to justify himself, and he says, "Yadana beit lo parach la'avoda el Zara." So this Gemara now touches on the idea that we ended up with yesterday about a ger toshav, that if the idol worshiper is committed to desist from worshiping idols, he's no longer an idol worshiper, then we don't have to be afraid that maybe on the day of his holiday, he's going to come into the, to the Mokum of Avoda Zara, and he's going to pay homage to his idol, because he's not an idol worshiper. So the fact that he's not Jewish, that per se does not make him into an idol worshiper. And Rabbi Yehuda wants to differentiate between one person and another. One person is, we assume he's an idol worshiper. And this person, we know that he doesn't worship idols. Now, the Gemara is going to object to Rabbi Yehuda on the grounds that he's not a ger toshav. A ger toshav needs a formal acceptance of a commitment to desist from Avodah Zarah, and he has to make that formal declaration in front of a tribunal of three. And we don't know about this Avidrana that he did such a thing, so he doesn't really come under the category of a ger toshav. However, the commentaries here are bothered by a different question. We have a rule that Dover Sheviminyan Einata Rashoy Latiro Ella B'Minyan Acher Shu Gadol Mimenu. So once the High Court of Israel, let's call it the Anshe Knesset Gdola, have already issued an Isur that we're not allowed to have any business dealings with an idol worshiper on Yom Ejam, on their holiday, then if you want to be matir it and say, well, let's find a kula and a leniency in this particular case, then you need another bezdin to overrule the original decision of the first bezdin. And the answer apparently to this problem is that the original bezdin only instituted this isur, this gzera of not doing business with the goyim near their Yom Edom or on their Yom Edom, only in a case where we assume that this person that you're doing business with is an idolater. So the Isur never was established from the get-go regarding a guy who's not an idol worshiper. And the Rambam has a long discussion about this with regard to Muslims, because the Rambam's opinion is that Islam is not Avodah Zarah, it's not idolatry. And then the question becomes, according to the Rambam Shita, what would be if we were to give gifts to the Muslims on their various holidays, or alternatively, if they touch wine. In any event, the Gemara now is focused on the idea of ger toshav. Amalei Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef objects to Rav Yehuda Vatanya. We learned in the Brayso Eizu ger toshav kol shekivu of b'fnei shlosha chaverim shalolav and avodas kochavim. So don't just tell me about this Avidrana that he doesn't worship idols. He doesn't gain the status of a ger toshav unless he has a formal acceptance in front of a court, which is not the case with regard to Avidrana. He never made this commitment. So Rabbi Yehuda responds and he says, Ki tanya ahi lach yoso. So with regard to the status of a non-Jew as a ger toshav, we have different halachas, different categories. If we want to upgrade the status of this guy to that of a ger toshav in the full sense of the term, which means that we have to support him financially if he needs our help. For that, we need a formal acceptance in front of a bezdin. But then there's another halacha, which is a kind of a lower key kind of status as a ger toshav, in which we know that this particular guy is committed not to violate the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, including Avoda Zara, but he never had a formal acceptance. And we can, so to speak, give him a quasi status, a partial status of a ger toshav to allow him to, to let's say, if if he comes in contact with our wine, maybe he doesn't create a full-fledged yayin nesech with an isar no, because he's already committed to avoid avodah zarah, although he never had the formal acceptance. The Omar Rav Bar Hana Rabbi Yochanan ger toshav she'ovru olav shnei masar chodesh v'lo mal hareu kimin sheba ovdei kochavim. Now, what happens is that a guy, let's say he's on his way to convert, but he never underwent milah. Now, milah is an absolute critical requirement in gerus, and this ger toshav, so to speak, uh, may have made a commitment that he wants to become a ger, but he never underwent circumcision, and therefore he has the status of like a min. Now, presumably, this person who has not yet undergone milah, and he's not yet formally and legally a convert, but nevertheless, he doesn't worship idols. So in the case of Avidrana, he didn't worship idols, but on the other hand, he never converted, and he never underwent milah. And therefore, according to this statement here of Rava Bar Chana, the name of Rabbi Yochanan, he should have the status of a min. And if he's a min, then he's like an idol worshiper, and therefore you're not allowed to give gifts to an idol worshiper. Hasam kigon shekibel of lamuv lamol. Why does Rabbi Yochanan go as far as to say that this ger toshav, after 12 months, gets the status of a min? Why? And the answer is because he accepted upon himself a commitment to undergo milah, and he never followed through with that commitment. And since he made that pledge, and now we find out that he wasn't sincere about it, therefore, we don't believe that if he pledges that he won't worship idols, then he's really committed to that. We see he's a flimsy kind of guy. He's not reliable. Rava Amtuye Le Kurbana, he also had a story of a gift where he sent a gift to somebody called Bar Sheshach B'Yom Edyom. Omar, how did he justify sending a gift to an idol worshiper on the festival day? I know about him, just like we saw in the previous case, that he doesn't worship Avodah Zarah. Ozal Ashkeche de Yosef al Tzavore beVarda. Rava visited, or how should I say, he encountered this Bar Shishach, who was apparently a very important person in the higher governmental echelons. And Rava comes across this fellow sitting in a bathhouse. Their whole culture was all about, enjoying the physical pleasures of this world, like going to the bathhouses. And he was sitting, Yosef, he was sitting ad savare, up to his neck. Bivarda, Rada, even in modern Hebrew today, a vered is a rose. And, this is the spitz of tanugos, of pleasures of this world. He's submerging himself in the hot waters of the bath with petals of rose around him. V'kaimon, and in front of him are zonos arumos kameh, prostitutes, and they're naked in front of him. Omale, so Bar Shishach says to Rava, Islachu ki hai gavna b'alma diyasi. In your perception of Judaism in the world to come, would you have such pleasures? Omale, didan adifat femihai. Our pleasures in the world to come are far superior to your pleasures here in this world. Omale, Bar Shishach denies this. He says, Tfemihai mihava. Come on. I'm not lacking any pleasures in this world. And can you tell me that you'll have these pleasures in the world to come? Omole. So Rava says to him, Asun ika laichu a mosa de malchusa. I'll prove to you that we're one up on you because you live in the fear of the government, of the malchusa. Malchusa means the monarchy. Anan, we, lo te'even Allah, when we come before the Ribono Shalom in the world to come. We have no fear of any human monarchs like you do, and we're not in that pressure and that tension. Omar Bar Sheshach says, wait a minute, I'm a very important person in the government. I don't have any fear of the government. Adi Osi, as they're sitting and talking, Osahu Parsika de Malka, right? The emissary of the king comes along and he says, Amalei Kum de Kaboile Malka, get up, Barshesha, get up, and the king has summoned you. He needs you. Now, Barshesha said at this point had to leave all the zonos and all the Beis HaMerchatz and all the pleasures in order to immediately attend to the king. So Rava was proven correct that even Bar Shishach, despite his very high status, and he thinks he can be freely unfettered, in terms of his ultimate pleasures of this world, even he has to drop his pleasures of this world for the sake of the monarch, which is exactly what Rava was trying to prove. Ki nafik vi azil amole, as Bar Shishach was going out, he says to Rava, Eina de boy lemechse lechu bishusa tivka. The eye that wishes to see evil come upon you should be detached from its socket. Now, there are two things going on over here. Number one, Bar Sheshach, on the surface of it, is praising Rava for his greatness, that he was proved to be correct. And therefore he says, if there's someone who seeks to bring evil upon you, let his eye be detached from his socket. But on the other hand, apparently, this statement that was made by Bar Shishach to Rava was an indication, what we call a Gili Milsa, that this is what he had in his heart. Meaning, although he was talking about someone else who has the evil eye against the Jewish people, he himself had the evil eye against the Jewish people. And Amalei Rava Amen. So Rava says Amen to this curse that came out of the mouth of Bar Sheshach, because that curse really reflects back on Bar Sheshach, bounces back on Bar Sheshach himself. And Paka'ena to Bar Sheshach. As a result of Rava saying just those three letters, Amen, Bar Sheshach lost his eye. And he becomes, in a sense, a victim of his own curse, because Rava understood that he himself fit this category and deserved this curse because he had enmity against the Jewish people. Omar Papa says to Rava, you know what? When Bar Sheshach challenged you and he said, hey, you don't have even a possibility of having the pleasures in the world to come that we have in this world, says Rav Papa, you know what Rava should have quoted a pasuk to prove that point, pasuk in Tehillim. He should have said, "Benos malachim bikoresech," etc., etc. The daughters of kings will honor you. The queen will stand erect on your right side, bedecked in jewelry of Ophir gold. And this pasuk proves that the pleasures of the Jews in the world to come surpass those pleasures of Bar Shesha. Omer Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Rava could have slugged him up and proven his point from a pasuk in Yeshaya that no one but God has seen the honor and the glory that he will bestow upon the Jews in the world to come. Nothing of the like of the sort has ever been witnessed. Ayin lo ras Elohim zulasecha zulascha yaseh lemachbi lo. So we see that in the world to come, we'll have pleasures that will supersede all the pleasures in this world. And once again, I'm thinking of the Muslims. Anyway, so the Mishnah said, as we get back to our Mishnah, "Scharo lasos ima malacha acheres," then it's mutter. In other words, if the Jew was hired not exclusively to work with Yain Nesef, but also for other malachos, then it's mutter. Now, we have to understand exactly how this schirus, this hiring relationship for a worker, how is it set up? So the Gemara wants to say that since the Mishnah did not qualify it and said that as long as there's a malach acheres somewhere in the deal, then it's okay, it's mutter. Afal gavdelu omer leili tuse erev. The Gemara says that this Mishnah imply that even if the work that addressed or encompassed the Yayin Nesach would take place at the end of the day. And that's a big chiddush, because if, let's say, they agree to X, let's say the Jew will transport, bottles of beverages, of Coca-Cola. But at the end of the day, he will be transporting Yayin Nesach. So that's something else, because then his salary, his wages are for all the work that he did during the course of the day. At the end of the day, he did a little bit of work with Yayin Nesach. But what would be if at the beginning of the day, when he starts his workday, he would be involved in Yayin Nesach? Uraminu, I'm going to prove to you that in such a case, it should be awesome. Hasoches apol ulesuse erev omalo. If at the end of the day he says to him, please transport this bottle or this cask of Yayin Nesek from one place to the other, that's something else, because then his salary is being paid for all the work he did during the entire day. But time of the Yomalei Susi Erev in, but Kuli Yomalo. But if his instruction regarding moving and transporting the Yayin Nesach barrel was during the course of the day, then that's a major part of his salary, and he's getting paid a wage which he's benefiting from the Yayin Nesach. Yayin Nesach is also Mano. Omer Abaye, Ki Tnan Nami Masnisin, Diyomer Lususe Erev Tnan. We're going to have to, says Abaye, limit the application of our Mishnah. And the Mishnah is going to be a case where only at the end of the day, right before Tzeisak Ochavim, that's when he was required or commissioned by the Balabayas, by the idolater, to do this work with the Yayin Nesach. But Einochinami, according to Abai, if during the course of the day he was working with Yayin Nesach, even though he did other works as well, then it would be us. Rava says no. I'm not going to go down that route. Low kasha. And the question is not a shver kasha. Why? In the Bryce's case, Hadi Amalei Haverli Mea Chavios B'Mea Prutos. So the stipulation was not on the entire Mea Chavios, of which let's say one out of the 100 is Yayin Nesech. And basically the wage is for the entire 100 barrels, including a barrel of Yayin Nesach. So the stipulation of his wage includes Hana, a wage for transporting Yayin Nesach. That's why the Bryce says it's us. But in our case of the Mishnah, the Amalei Haveli Chavis Bebruta. I'm not paying you for the entire 100 barrels, and unless you transport 100 barrels, I'm not going to pay you a red cent. No, I'm going to pay you one pruta for each single barrel. So every barrel is now a new agreement. And what happens is, let's say he gets paid $100, then he'll take $1, the Jew, and he'll throw it into the Yamamel, because for the 99 barrels he earned, those are beverages that are not Yayin. And for Tanya, again, the for Tanya, it's a little tricky, means I'll bring you a support text from a brisa. Hasochres hapoel v'yomer lo haver li mea chavios b'mea prutos v'nimtzeis chavis shel yayin nesech b'neihem scharos. If the deal was, I want you to transport all these 100 barrels, I don't want to see one barrel left behind. That's also because amongst the barrels, there's a barrel of Yayin Esach, so you're getting paid for moving the Yayin Esach. If you don't transport the Yayin Esach, that one barrel, the deal is off. You won't get a penny. So obviously you're getting Hana from the Yayin Esach. But if he says Chavis Bepruta, every single barrel is a separate wage, a separate deal, and I'll give you a pruta for each barrel that you move. Then it's okay. 99 out of $100 he'll pocket, and the $1 that was for that Yayin Nesech barrel he'll have to throw into the Yamamil. The Mishnah says Yayin Nesech Scharo Asur. So in those days, in order to transport their merchandise to the market, they used to hire out a donkey. Now this donkey belongs to a Jew who's hiring it to the idol worshiper, and he's going to transport Yayin Nesach. It means that the rental fees that the Jew is collecting is for Yayin Nesach, and therefore he's benefiting from Yayin Nesach, which is an Isra non Yayin Nesach, and it's awesome. So the Gemara says, Hasu Lamali. Why does the Mishnah have to bother with this case? It's basically a repetition, Ainu Reisha. That's what we learned in the Reisha. And the Gemara answers, Sefer Itzruch Schara Leishev Oleha. Leishev Oleha means literally to sit on the donkey, and that's what he rented it for. But no, here it means to ride the donkey. Afal pi shediach ovikacham legino Oleha. Gino is a flask. They used to put these skin flasked containers, and they used to put the yayin, the wine, inside of it. So the idol worshiper is now transporting with this donkey of the Jew his yayin nesach, because that's what's in the flask. And now there's a gewaltige chiddush, because I would say in such a case that part of the agreement of this renting out the donkey is for the purpose of yayin nesach, to transport the yayin nesach from place to place. It should be awesome. Schara mutter. The Mishnah wants to tell me, no, that's a big chiddush, that it's mutter. And why is that? Because it's like scharo lemeloch acheres, which means that he's hired not just to transport the flask of yayin, but for other merchandise that the idol worshiper wants to bring to the market. That's all on the back of this donkey. So Lamema, does this Mishnah now teach us the login lav dina hudi liosve? I'll explain it in a minute. Urminu asoches achamor sochem meiniach olek suso leginoso ule mazonos shel oso derech. So again, the word ginoso, which is the flask of wine. Okay. Mikam v'elech. Now, what about when he's taking the donkey back? Is chamor ma'akiv alav. So again, if somebody hires a donkey, then he's legally entitled to place his flask on it. So therefore, if that's part of the legal agreement, then how could the Mishnah say that the Jew is allowed to rent out his donkey, knowing full well that the idol worshiper is going to put his flask of wine on top of the donkey to transport it from place to place? Now, the Jew is getting benefit from Yayin Nesach. How could that possibly be mutter? Now, let's point out, because this is going to be relevant a little bit later on in the daf, that the agreement is such that the owner of the donkey could also, put his supplies on the back of the donkey. And that's what it says here, chamar, well, chamor, meaning the donkey driver, meniach oleha si orim v'temen zonos shalosa yom. Right, the driver needs to take along his supplies as they travel for a week or whatever they're going to do. So he's only allowed to put on the donkey driver who rented out the donkey. He's only allowed to put on the back of the donkey that which he needs for that day. In other words, every day is a separate entity, and he'll buy the supplies for that day. So therefore, he doesn't have to transport the supplies on top of the donkey. Even though when the donkey driver rents out the donkey, the idol worshiper is allowed to put his flask of wine, of yayin nesach, on top of the back of the donkey to transport it and maybe sell it in the market. But mia ilo mosivle, if let's say the idol worshiper doesn't take advantage of the rights that he has within this contractual agreement, and he never actually places his yayin nesach on top of the donkey, is amrina le nake le agra de liginosa? Can he get a reduction in the rental price? Notice, to what extent is the yayin nesach flask critical to the rental agreement? If it was actually critical to the rental agreement, meaning he's paying extra money for the transportation of the wine, then Lu Yitzur, he doesn't take advantage and implement that right that he has, and he doesn't put any flasks of wine on the top of the animal's back. Donkey, he should be able to get a refund, but he doesn't get a refund. So therefore, what we see is that the rental fee that this idolater is paying, is not really for the yayin nesach itself. If it would be for the yayin nesach, then he would have a right to say, well, give me a reduction because I never put my yayin nesach on it. So since the fee is not being paid for the right to transport the yayin nesach, therefore it's permitted for the Jewish owner of the donkey to enter into such a rental agreement. Heichidami. Now, this heichidami has nothing to do with Masechet Avoda Zara. This heichidami once we mentioned the brisa, and in the brisa it mentioned that the flask has yain nesach in it, so now we want to understand the brisa per se. Meaning, what are the rights, the mutual rights of the renter who rents the donkey and the driver who rented it out to him? If they're traveling through an area where there are plenty of marketplaces and supermarkets and he can get the provisions that he needs, everything's available for purchase, is chamor nami liaket. Then why can't the donkey driver say to the idolater in this case, you know what? I don't want you to burden my animal with all these supplies. These provisions you could buy in the local market. But if the reason why the renter, I mean the idolater, has rights to put his provisions on top of the back of the donkey, and presumably that weighs down the donkey, is because there are no provisions available, is socher nami lo lakiv. Why does it say in the Mishnah that the idolater has a right to say to the donkey owner, you know what? I'm akiv. Ma'akiv means I don't want you to weigh down the donkey with your supplies. But wait a second. The donkey driver has to get supplies. He can't starve. Now, the key word here is lemitrach. Lemitrach means to trouble oneself. Miloshen tircha. And what it means is that although there are marketplaces and you could acquire the provisions that you need for that day, but it does involve troubling yourself. You have to make sure that you can buy enough provisions for the next day of journey. So is food available in the places, the locations that they're traveling? The answer is yes, but Tamar darki lemitrach ulemizvan, but socher lav darki lemitrach ulemizvan. We're going to allow the socher, in this case the idolater renter, to pack up on top of the back of the donkey provisions because we don't expect him. It's not usual for him to run around in the markets and buy all his provisions. But as far as the donkey driver is concerned, his practice is to trouble himself and purchase food each night. Avoda Rav Acha Brei Rav Ika. Now, before we turn the daf, it's a little bit strange over here. Avua de Rav Acha, the father of Acha, and Brei Rav Ika, but he's the son of Rav Ika. So I guess you're telling me that somebody, we don't know his name, is the father of Acha, and he's the son of Rav Ika. It's almost like, a guessing game. Who is this guy? We can't identify him, but what we know is that he has a son named Rav Acha and a father of Ika. So this is a subject here of the Baliotosis, and apparently Rashi deals with it elsewhere in Chulin. I guess he's saying that Rav Acha was well known. Rav Ika was not well known. So therefore they referred to him as the father of Rav Acha. All right.